You know, when someone with avoidant tendencies pulls away, it's easy to assume they've stopped caring. It's easy to believe they've moved on, detached, and closed the door behind them, but the truth is far more layered than that. Because even when they create distance, even when they seem emotionally unreachable, they're still watching, they're still waiting, and yes, they're still expecting something from you. When you go into no contact, the avoidant expects silence but not indifference. They expect you to respect their space yet still think about them. They crave emotional distance yet want emotional relevance. In their mind, they want to know that you're not chasing, but you also haven't disappeared. It's this subtle dance, a paradox where they feel safest when they believe you still care, but are no longer trying to control or fix them. See, the avoidant's biggest fear is being consumed. They fear losing themselves in someone else's emotions. So when you step back, they feel relief at first, but then comes curiosity, then a little confusion, then a whisper of longing. They start wondering, are they really gone? Do they still want me? Have they moved on? And that moment, that quiet internal question, is the first sign that your distance has shifted the power dynamic. What they secretly expect is that your silence will make them feel safe enough to miss you. They want to know you won't force connection, that you're strong enough to walk away yet still warm enough to care, because nothing draws an avoidant closer than realizing they can lose you, without pressure, without drama, without a fight. No contact isn't revenge. It's not punishment. It's the most powerful mirror you can hold up to someone who runs from love, it says. I can give you space and still know my worth. And in that silence, the avoidant begins to see what they've lost, not because you begged, but because you didn't. Because you finally gave them the one thing they never knew they needed, freedom without abandonment. So if you're in that quiet space right now wondering if they think of you, if they notice, if they care, remember this: the avoidant always notices absence. They don't forget you, they just need to realize in their own time that losing your presence is far scarier than facing their own vulnerability. Your silence is not emptiness, it's strength. And sometimes, strength is the only language love truly understands. When an avoidant person pulls away, it's rarely because they've stopped caring. More often, it's because closeness begins to feel unsafe. To them, emotional intimacy can feel like pressure, like a slow suffocation of independence. But here's the irony: while they crave space, they don't actually want to be forgotten. Deep down, they want to matter. They want to know that their absence is felt, and that's where the paradox begins. They want distance, yet they also want significance. When you go no contact, you enter a delicate emotional landscape. The avoidant initially feels relief, the kind of relief that comes from being able to breathe again after feeling emotionally crowded. But relief doesn't last forever, because in that quiet, something begins to shift. At first, they tell themselves they needed this break, that they're better off alone. But slowly, curiosity creeps in. They start to wonder what you're thinking, whether you've accepted their silence, and most importantly, whether you've moved on. The avoidant's mind often runs on control, not control over you, but over how much emotion they have to face. When you're no longer reaching out, they lose that sense of emotional predictability. Suddenly, they're not sure where they stand. Did you take their silence as rejection? Have you finally stopped caring? The very thing they wanted, emotional peace, now becomes uncertainty. And uncertainty has a way of drawing attention back to the one thing they were trying to avoid: their feelings. See, the avoidant doesn't truly want endless solitude. They want to feel free within connection. They want to be wanted without being chased. So when you respect their need for distance, but you don't disappear in bitterness or desperation, you communicate something powerful. You show that love doesn't have to be a trap, that it can exist without demands. And in that moment, you become emotionally safe in a way they never expected. Your silence starts to echo in their mind. Every day that passes without your message makes them question whether they misjudged your strength. They thought you'd chase, that you'd cling, that you'd try to fix it because that's what they've seen before. But when you don't, you rewrite the script. You show them that love can be calm, that letting go doesn't mean not caring. This quiet strength confuses them, challenges their assumptions, and awakens their curiosity. So while the avoidant may have asked for space, what they secretly expect is that you'll still think about them, that your silence carries meaning. They want to feel your absence, not your resentment. They want to know they mattered, even in distance. That paradox is at the heart of the avoidant experience. They long for emotional relevance without emotional closeness. And when you hold your silence with grace, you give them exactly what they didn't know. They were seeking a connection that exists without control. Avoidants often view emotional closeness through a lens of caution. To them, connection is not simply about affection, it's about exposure. The more someone gets emotionally close, the more they fear losing control over their own identity, needs, and boundaries. This is why pressure, even when it's well-intentioned, feels suffocating to them. When someone tries to seek clarity, reassurance, or emotional validation from them, they interpret it as a demand, and that demand triggers their instinct to pull away. What the avoidant secretly craves isn't a partner who pushes harder for closeness, but someone who allows space without withdrawal, love without expectation, and connection without pressure. During no contact, emotional safety becomes everything. When you stop chasing, calling, or seeking answers, you remove the element of emotional demand. Suddenly, there's no pressure to perform or to explain. This silence offers them something rare, the freedom to process their emotions at their own pace. Avoidants are not incapable of feeling. They're simply slower to engage with those feelings when they fear judgment or confrontation. When you step back, you unknowingly give them emotional safety, the breathing room they need to face their own discomfort without feeling cornered. At first, they may feel relieved. They'll tell themselves that the silence proves their decision was right, that space was exactly what they needed, but with time, that relief begins to evolve into reflection. The absence of pressure removes the noise, and without noise, they begin to notice what they actually miss: your calm presence, your warmth, the feeling of being understood without being forced. Emotional safety doesn't come from proving your love. It comes from showing restraint. It's the quiet message that says, I care, but I don't need to control. In the avoidance world, love often feels dangerous because it demands vulnerability. But when you demonstrate self-control, when you can let them have their space without collapsing into anxiety, you prove something powerful. You show them that love doesn't have to mean losing freedom. You become a mirror that reflects stability instead of fear, and slowly, that safety begins to dismantle their walls. They start to realize that maybe intimacy isn't as threatening as they believed. Maybe closeness doesn't have to come with chaos. Your emotional restraint becomes the bridge between their fear and their longing. The more you respect their silence, the more they begin to feel safe enough to wonder about you. They may not say it, but they notice the shift, that they're thinking of you not because you demanded attention, but because your calm confidence invited reflection. Pressure repels the avoidant, safety draws them in. And when they begin to feel safe, missing you stops being a threat. It becomes an invitation. In that emotional stillness, they start to see you not as someone who needs them, but as someone who chooses them, and that subtle distinction is where connection truly begins. No contact is often misunderstood as a form of punishment, a tactic to make someone miss you or feel guilty. But in truth, it's not about manipulation, it's about self-empowerment. It's the moment you stop trying to control how someone else feels and start reclaiming the energy you've been pouring into uncertainty. For someone with avoidant tendencies, constant pursuit reinforces their fears. They interpret emotional pressure as a loss of autonomy. So when you step back, you're not giving up, you're showing them what healthy detachment looks like. You're saying, I respect your boundaries, but I also respect myself. That balance is where empowerment begins. When an avoidant withdraws, many people react out of fear. They chase, explain, or plead, hoping to restore connection. But this only feeds into the avoidance belief that intimacy equals entrapment. By entering no contact, you disrupt that pattern. You remove yourself from the push and pull dynamic that keeps both of you stuck in emotional exhaustion. The silence isn't cold, it's clear. It's the emotional reset that says, I will no longer participate in what drains me. That energy shift does something profound. It recenters you, but it also changes how the avoidant experiences your absence. At first, they might interpret your distance as expected. They believe you'll wait, that you'll eventually reach out again. But as days turn into weeks and you remain calm and grounded, something begins to shift in their perception. They start to realize that your silence isn't weakness, it's strength. You're not chasing because you've accepted that love can't be one-sided. You're not seeking reassurance because you've built it within yourself. This quiet self-assurance is something most avoidants don't encounter often. It's magnetic. It makes them question their assumptions, not about you, but about love itself. The beauty of no contact is that it doesn't demand recognition. It invites reflection. It's a mirror that reveals who's truly willing to meet you halfway. For the avoidant, this experience can be both confusing and awakening. They're used to people reacting emotionally, not responding with poise. So when you remain steady, when you respect their distance without anger, they begin to see you differently. You're no longer part of the emotional chaos they feared. You've become a source of peace, and peace is something they've secretly longed for but didn't know how to create. Empowerment through no contact isn't about waiting for the other person to change. It's about shifting your focus from reaction to reflection. When you choose silence, you're teaching both yourself and them a new rhythm, one built on boundaries, not fear. And that's what reveals true value. The avoidant begins to sense that your presence was a gift, not an expectation. Your absence, handled with grace, speaks louder than words. It shows them that love grounded in self-respect is the only kind that can truly last. Avoidants often crave freedom more than they crave connection, and that's where much of the misunderstanding begins. They aren't necessarily running from love, they're running from the feeling of being trapped within it. When relationships start to feel emotionally intense or demanding, they instinctively create space to protect their independence. But what they rarely expect is that true freedom can also come from being with someone who doesn't try to control or chase them. That's why, when you finally let go, when you stop explaining, convincing, or reaching out, you give them a kind of emotional release that their nervous system deeply needs. In that release, something unexpected happens. Longing begins to grow. At first, your silence feels like validation to them. They think, good, I finally have the space I wanted. They breathe easier, convinced that they've regained their sense of control. But as time passes, that quiet becomes louder. They start to notice the absence of your voice, your presence, your energy. The human mind naturally fills silence with thought, and for avoidance, this space, once comforting, becomes reflective. They start wondering how you're doing, whether you've moved on, and what your life looks like without them. And because you're no longer chasing, they can finally look at the connection without defensiveness. You've given them the space to miss you on their own terms. Freedom doesn't destroy attraction, it amplifies it. When you hold your distance with strength and grace, you send a powerful message that your love isn't about possession. You're showing that you can walk away not from love, but from anything that requires you to shrink yourself. This energy, calm yet confident, begins to replace the anxious pursuit they feared. Avoidants may not express it openly, but they're deeply drawn to people who embody emotional stability. When you give them freedom without resentment, they begin to see you as safe. And once they feel safe, curiosity turns into missing, and missing turns into desire. Many people believe that the way to make someone see your worth is to prove it through effort. But with an avoidant, effort often reads as pressure. What changes everything is restraint, the ability to hold back when every part of you wants to reach out. That restraint communicates strength, and strength is irresistible to someone who's used to feeling emotionally overwhelmed. Your quiet confidence makes them rethink what intimacy means. They start to realize that real closeness doesn't come from demands, it comes from mutual respect. By granting them freedom, you shift from being a source of emotional intensity to a source of peace. They begin to understand that losing your presence isn't just about missing you, it's about losing the only version of love that didn't try to control them. And that realization plants a seed they can't ignore. It turns your absence into a mirror, reflecting back everything they once ran from, not your need, but your value. Silence is one of the most powerful forms of communication in any relationship, especially with someone who has avoidant tendencies. While words often create pressure or misunderstanding, silence has a way of revealing truth not just to the other person, but to yourself. For the avoidant, silence from you isn't emptiness, it's an energy shift. They notice it, they feel it, and over time they begin to think about it. Because avoidants are highly sensitive to emotional cues, even when they seem detached. When the energy changes, when your voice, attention, and affection are no longer directed at them, they feel that withdrawal deeply, even if they pretend otherwise. Your silence speaks of self-worth in a way no speech could. It says, I will not chase someone who needs space. I will not prove my value through pursuit. That kind of quiet confidence unsettles the avoidant's assumptions about love. They expect intensity, confrontation, or emotional pleading. They're used to people reacting, not responding. So when you meet their silence with peace, when you don't demand closure or clarity, you stand out. You're showing a maturity that doesn't feed into their fears. It's as if your stillness becomes the first safe space they've ever felt within connection, one where love isn't conditional on proximity or performance. What makes silence so powerful is that it leaves room for reflection. In the absence of words, the avoidant's inner dialogue grows louder. They start asking themselves questions they've avoided for a long time. Did I take them for granted? Why am I still thinking about them? Why do I miss their calm energy? These aren't questions they can answer immediately, but they are the beginning of emotional awakening. Your silence allows them to process these thoughts without feeling forced into a corner. And because you've removed pressure, they can finally feel safe enough to face their own emotions. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, silence becomes rare, and rare things carry value. Your ability to stay grounded and composed in no contact shows emotional intelligence. It tells them that your love isn't impulsive or chaotic. It tells them that you have boundaries and that you respect yourself enough not to chase someone who isn't ready. That strength becomes magnetic. The avoidant begins to associate you with calmness rather than conflict, and that contrast makes your absence louder than any words you could have spoken. Ultimately, silence is not about withholding, it's about choosing peace. It's about knowing when your energy is better spent healing than explaining. For the avoidant, that silence becomes a mirror, one that reflects both your strength and their loss. They begin to see that your stillness isn't rejection, it's self-respect. And in that realization, they start to understand something profound. Love that doesn't chase is love that's worth returning to. In the end, understanding the avoidant isn't about changing them, it's about reclaiming your own power through patience, silence, and self-respect. When you stop chasing and start choosing peace, you show that love can exist without fear, control, or pressure. You become the calm in their storm, the quiet reminder that true connection grows in freedom, not force. And sometimes the most powerful message you can send is the one spoken in silence. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for giving yourself permission to love from strength rather than need.